What is up, guys? So a couple of weeks ago I made a video going over my 10 favorite episodes from The Flash. Today I'm going to be a little bit more negative. In this video I'll be going over my 10 least favorite episodes from The Flash, updated for season 6, which sadly did give us a couple episodes that would qualify for a list like this one. So with that in mind, let's go over my top 10 least favorite episodes of The Flash, or as the title of this video is, the top 10 worst episodes of The Flash.
Stolen tech? I think I know where to look.
We can use it to stop Cicada.
Gentlemen, welcome to the market.
Let's make a deal.
Making a deal with the devil.
Tonight you're working for Goldfaced.
This episode was really annoyingly placed in the season. It was a season of just the episode after episode where Barry wasn't really using his powers very much. He wasn't focused on it. And when we finally got an episode where he was focused on, he didn't use his powers. He never put on a Flash costume. On top of that, the fact that the whole storyline was with Goldfaced, who was a very campy villain, and we'll see him again on this list, don't worry, like the only other episode he ever appears in. He's not a good villain, he's very campy, and while he does have, there are some good things about this episode, like seeing Barry and Ralph team up is always good. But on the other hand, you have the Council of Wells, or the Sherlock's wife's stuff, which is... But on the other hand, you have all the wives of Sherlock in this Council of Wells knockoff, which is even worse somehow than the Council of Wells, so I don't think this is a generally good episode, and one of my least favorite from Season 5.
My wife was abducted. I have to save her.
That mirrorverse warps the mind until the person is no longer recognizable. If Iris is still alive in there, there's probably nothing left of her to save.
This episode had the unfortunate task of being the season finale of Season 6, even though it was not supposed to be. I'm not going to hold it against the episode much, but it is still a very unsatisfying ending to the season. However, again, not going to hold it much against the episode, because that's not really the biggest problem, and it's not the episode's fault. The problem with this episode is, first of all, the fight scenes are terrible because of the editing. This is a choice that they made to break up the fight scenes into these blocks, something that they've never done before, something that is unwarranted and very random to just put into this one episode, and it feels so stupid and campy. I get they were trying to go for a comic booky thing, but this is not a comic book, it's live action, and with all these blocks, it just looks so stupid. On top of that, the whole storyline of Barry protecting Carver is so frustrating because he goes to any length to protect this person who is not a person worthy of protection, and it's just a very frustrating storyline. I get that he's a hero, but he doesn't. It's not a good storyline, is what I'm trying to get at. So this, not a satisfying ending to the season. It's terribly edited. The storylines are not good, and while there are some good things that I'm not going to go over here because that's not the point of this video, I do think that it is one of the worst episodes of the show, which is a huge shame.
There is a monster in Central City.
Yes, the monster.
Triangulate the signal.
Okay, let's just triangulate.
Barry, we're gonna do Empire.
Empire of the Sun, Barry.
What? Empire Strikes Back.
Empire Strikes Back, Barry.
Nobody's...
So looking back, Season 3 is actually a lot better than we initially thought it was, because it wasn't as good as Season 1 or 2. We thought it was the worst thing ever, but then Season 4 and 5 came out, the second half of Season 6. There are a lot of worse things that have happened other than Season 3, so honestly, you won't be seeing a lot of Season 3 episodes here, except for this one, which is the worst episode of Season 3. There was like a big part of Season 3 near the beginning that was really boring, and there was Flashpoint, which could have lasted a lot of episodes, but it didn't. Then there was just a whole bunch of boring episodes until like episode 6 or 7, and this episode, Monster, is the worst of them. It's an incredibly boring episode with a nothing villain. This villain is like a 16-year-old kid who's bullied or something. We never see him, we just see this monster. So the villain is like nothing. The side storyline with Caitlin is not as interesting as the Killer Frost storyline typically is. So this episode is not terrible necessarily. Like, it is the worst episode of Season 3, but the other seasons do have a lot worse episodes, but it is still not very good, and it's at this point on the list.
Well, we got a ragdoll, a weather witch. Hold up, is that crazy B-girl? Hey girl, what's going on? She's working with them. We don't know what she's capable of.
I hate you!
I couldn't stop her.
I'm not the same person.
So Season 5 is not exactly the most popular season of the show, but I think it began to have a little bit like a momentum in episode 16-17 with the whole revelation of Nora working with Thawne, that revelation to Team Flash. I think that storyline was going well. until this episode came along and just put a damper on everything. They chose to do this rogues team up instead of continue the storyline, or at least instead of focusing on that storyline. It was a little bit here or there, but it was mostly about the new rogues and these young rogues, or whatever you want to call them, and that's so annoying. It was really bad for the structure of the season. It was really bad for the pacing of the season, and it's just generally not a great episode. There are a lot of really bad things in this episode other than that, like campiness, the focus on Nora instead of Barry, and the focus on the fact that they did not focus on that drama, which could have been good, but wasn't. It's overall not exactly the worst episode ever, but I just really don't like how it's placed in the season and how much it dampers the pacing of what could have, I think, been a good ending to the season.
I know this is serious.
You got an odd way of showing it.
Just that any time that I'm afraid, I make jokes.
Always knew you were lightweight, Ralph.
She's filled you with helium.
Maybe you should.
Season 4 had a good amount of bad episodes that technically weren't filler because they focused on these bus metas. That wasn't a good excuse, however. It still just feels like a villain of the week episode, and it's a very bad villain. Null was terribly written, terribly acted, and she was not a good villain whatsoever. I'm glad she was killed off right away after this, and it didn't help that the whole side storyline with Breacher and Cisco and Caitlin was just god-awful. Cisco was just such an annoying character. It was a pointless storyline, also filler, did not need to exist, and it doesn't help that this is a filler episode that's also just does everything that it's trying to do so terribly. A filler episode can be good. My favorite episode of the show is technically at least mostly filler, but this episode is filler and also terrible, so it is one of the worst episodes of the show ever.
On your parade.
My name is Jay Garrick. Your world is in danger. When you created the singularity above Central City, you also created a portal connecting our two Earths. Where I came from, I was a speedster like you. They called me the Flash.
So, Season 2 is a very good season, much like Season 1. There's not a single episode from Season 1 on this list, and I don't want there to be an episode from Season 2 on this list. However, there is one episode from Season 2 that I really don't like, and I have a very hard time watching, and that's the first episode, The Man Who Saved Central City. This episode is just chock full of cringy moments like how they dealt with the ending of Season 1 with the death of Firestorm, and how the whole parade for the Flash. A lot of those things are cringy, but it's mainly like the effects, like the actual fight scenes that just looked so terrible. The Atom Smasher being used as a villain, I don't like that either, and the fact that Barry kills him in the end with no remorse and not even thinking about it, it's so out of character, and it's weird that they decided to start Season 2 this way. There are some interesting things about this episode, things that they start up for the rest of the season, like the concept of Zoom and how Atom Smasher mentions him, but still, I really don't like this episode. I really don't like how it's handled. I think that also the CGI is terrible, and again, I don't want there to be an episode from Season 2 on this list, but there is an episode of Season 2 on this list.
Iris is a speedster now.
I'll take it from here.
It's my turn to do what you've been doing.
Alright, a monitor from here then. Other monitor. Wow, it's super annoying.
Run, Iris, Run is currently the third lowest rated episode of the show ever. The other two episodes we haven't seen on this list yet, but I think it's low rated for good reason. As a whole, the episode is it's cringy, it's campy, it's not necessary, it is mostly very much filler, and by itself, it wouldn't really be this high on the list, but the fact that it's come with the rest of the season it really enhances all the problems. The main complaint of the season was that Iris is so much focused on, and Barry it feels like a secondary character in comparison, and with that, they give us this episode where Iris literally becomes the main character of the episode, and it is a little bit frustrating. I think what sucks the most about this is that the episode prior, I mentioned this episode earlier, is my favorite episode of the show, and it's so annoying how it goes from that, which was a great episode, right back to this episode, which is arguably one of the worst episodes of the show ever, and it really signifies the problem with this season. So it is number 4 on this list.
DeVoe is about to reset all of our brains. What we really need is Amunet. Amunet is immune to DeVoe's powers.
We can't partner up with Amunet. She's a criminal.
She kidnapped you. She tried to sell me into meta slavery.
And she ruined my bachelorette.
Run, Iris, Run is actually not my least favorite episode of Season 4, and it's not even my second to least favorite episode. There are 3 in the top 4 alone. Harry and the Harrisons is even worse than Run, Iris, Run. The actual namesake of the episode, the Harrys, or the Council of Wells, is pretty stupid and definitely not something you should be seeing in the third to last episode of the season, where we reach the climax of the season and they just should go off on this stupid, pointless tangent of the Council of Wells. On top of that, this episode focuses on Amunet Black, and absolutely the worst character on not only this show, but probably the worst character in the Arrowverse ever. Amunet Black is just so terrible. The way she's written, the way she's acted, it's the cringiest thing ever, and I'm gonna spoil it here. She is in every single episode in the top 3 on this list because she's such a bad character, and the fact that this episode focuses on her does not help this episode's sake whatsoever. So I think this is the second to worst episode of Season 4, the third to worst episode of the show ever, and a very, very bad episode. But I'll be talking about Amunet Black just a bit more in this next slot, and also number 1.
Thank you guys for coming.
You're gonna need to walk this off.
Or run it off because I'm the Flash.
Did you girls order a stripper?
Take it off.
So ever since November 2017, which was almost 2.5 years ago, well, at this point it's more than 2.5 years ago, it's almost 3 years ago, this episode was considered the worst episode. It was the lowest rated episode, it was my least favorite episode, and it was only recently dethroned in both of those regards. This episode has got off all the feminist stuff, all the cringy stuff that they have in this episode. It's not fun to watch. On top of that, I already mentioned this, Amunet Black is in this episode. She's also in the number 1 episode because she's just such a terrible character. I don't think I could say enough how god-awful she is, and every single time she's in an episode, it automatically makes that episode one of the worst episodes of the show ever. She's honestly that bad. Felicity's in this episode, but honestly, this episode is so bad that she has 0 effect on it. Like, her being there doesn't make the episode worse. It could also make it better for anybody who likes Felicity, so at least, I don't know, I don't really care in that regard. It's just that this episode has so many terrible things about it, and the only reason that it's not number 1, and it was dethroned recently, is because it does at least have some good humor. Drunk Barry, really that's the only reason this episode isn't number 1 at this point, because that is funny, and at least this episode has humor, while the number 1 spot doesn't even have that. And with that in mind, let's move on to the number 1 spot, which recently dethroned Girls' Night Out.
There's something off.
What happened? Nothing. I broke a bottle over some loser's head.
You've been acting kind of different.
You're the Flash. You know best, right? Behind every great man is a woman rolling her eyes.
So we managed to go 1 full season without Amunet Black, being season 5. That was actually the entirety of season 5, plus the entirety of like the first volume of season 6, which was it was good. Like, there was no god awful episodes, because whenever she's around, it's an automatic god awful episode. So ever since Harry and the Harrisons, where her last appearance, there was nothing god awful. Then season 6's second half came around, and Amunet Black came back, and she came back hard. Episode 11, titled Love is a Battlefield, is the worst episode of The Flash ever, in no small part due to Amunet Black. Terrible character, makes every episode she's in god-awful. She paired up with Goldfaced is even worse. Like Goldfaced already mentioned in this video, he's not a good villain, but him paired up with Amunet Black is the worst thing you could possibly have from this show. It's just every single scene in this episode was pure cringe. It was the cringiest thing I've ever seen, the cringiest episode of The Flash I've ever seen, one of the worst episodes of the Arrowverse ever, and one of the worst episodes I've ever seen in any show. It's that bad. So anyway, that's my ranking for the top 10 worst episodes of The Flash. If you haven't seen my video going over my top 10 best episodes of The Flash, there will be a link in the description down below and in the top right corner of the video, or at least in the top right corner of the video. But if you like this video, make sure to leave a like, share, and subscribe, and also leave your list in the comments down below. And thanks for watching.